Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to No Timeouts, a football show coming at you from the Score Studio. My name is Jonah Birenbaum. That is Dan Wilkins. That is Tyler MacKillop. That is Zak McDonald. You know them. You love them. Unfortunately, our pal Justin Boone is a little bit under the weather today, but hey, you got me back, so you got nothing to complain about. And speaking of being back, the intractable Kansas City Chiefs are back in the Super Bowl for a staggering and unprecedented fifth time in the last 6 seasons, while the Philadelphia Eagles, they're back in the big dance for the second time in the last 3 seasons, which is to say, Super Bowl 59. It's going to be a rematch of Super Bowl 57, with the Chiefs vying for an unprecedented 3 straight Super Bowl titles, and the Eagles looking for some revenge for their crushing 38-35 loss to KC in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and the second Super Bowl championship in franchise history. Now, we've got 2 episodes to tee up Super Bowl 59, and I promise we're going to get to the granular analysis. I promise. But before we get into the position-by-position matchup and stuff like that, Wilkie, just answer the fundamental question. Are the Chiefs really going to do it again?
I guess. I mean, I'm so done betting against this team, man. Like, I thought this was really going to be the year for the Ravens. I saw them as the best team in football. Obviously, they fall short in Buffalo. So I figure, why not back the Bills in the AFC title game? If ever there was going to be a season where they get over the hump, surely this was going to be it. Obviously not. The Chiefs are inevitable. And it's really crazy about this team that it doesn't really matter what they look like in the regular season. Obviously, the record was great, but I think we can all agree that at various points throughout the season, it seemed like the offense was every bit as frustrating as it was last year. At times, it seemed like the defense was taking a step back. But none of that matters. You get to the playoffs, and they just have this unbelievable knack to rise to the occasion and just play their best football in the biggest moments of the year. Obviously, a big part of that is having a roster full of Super Bowl champions and the best quarterback that personally I've ever seen, certainly the most clutch quarterback I've ever seen. But another big part of that is just the coaching staff. Andy Reid's offense is consistently 1 or 2 steps ahead of the competition in the playoffs from a game playing perspective, really no matter the opponent. And the same goes for the Steve Spagnuolo's defense. Chris Jones even said it after the AFC title game. As long as these teams needing a head coach don't swoop in and steal him away, we're going to keep winning. And really, it's hard to argue with them. The Eagles have a better roster on paper. Will not deny that, but I just don't think that matters. I think the Chiefs are going to win another Super Bowl, and we'll probably be making the same prediction for next year. So,
does a win cement this Chiefs team as the greatest dynasty of all time?
I mean, it's very similar to the Patriots. It's hard to compare because the Patriots was such an extended run. You had that break in between where they
10-year break.
Yeah,
they didn't win a Super Bowl.
They were still great.
There are two different dynasties.
I would agree with that. I would say that this would be the best singular dynasty. There's been no one like this team, I don't think.
No, 3 in a row is obviously unprecedented, but only one other team in history has won 4 Super Bowl titles in a 6-year span. That was the Terry Bradshaw Steelers of the 70s. No team has made it to 5 Super Bowls in a 6-year span. They're one of only 2 teams in history to make it to 7 consecutive conference championship games after the Patriots, who made it to 8 straight. I don't know how you could say that any dynasty was better, more intractable than this one. But
Patrick Mahomes is 17-3 in the playoffs.
That's so insane. That's actually so insane.
That's crazy.
However, as inevitable as this Chiefs team may seem, this is not going to be an easy matchup for them. Dan, you said it. The Eagles are better on paper. They certainly put up a hell of a fight in Super Bowl 57. I think we can all agree this Eagles team is better than that one that lost 2 years ago, and they're absolutely rolling right now. They've lost 1 game since their Week 5 bye, and none of their 3 playoff victories were all that close, even their 6-point win over the Rams. Furthermore, in the NFC Championship game, they put up 55 points. That was the most in a playoff game in a quarter century. But the Eagles aren't just a wagon and a worthy adversary of this Chiefs team. You see similarities between this Eagles team and the 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which, as of this moment, is the only team to defeat Patrick Mahomes and these Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate, even though unlike my good friend Danny, I did bet on the Chiefs last week.
You're no dummy.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, when you look back at that Super Bowl, injuries were a big factor for Kansas City going into that game, Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz being out. But the Bucs, I see these similarities from the fact that Mahomes was pressured on over 50% of his dropbacks in that Super Bowl. Between Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh, Shaq Barrett and JPP, they pressured him 28 times as a group. And Todd Bowles also threw a real wrench in what the Chiefs expected. He didn't blitz at all. He played a lot of drop coverage, a lot of light boxes, and played a lot of zone. And I think that the Eagles are the team that can replicate that formula when you look at how good Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter are up the middle. They're fine rotating in guys like a Jomo and Williams too. The D tackle spot is by far the best in the NFL. One of the best we've seen in quite some time, probably since that Bucs team, to be honest. And then they have good options on the edge with Sweat and Nolan Smith. Maybe Brandon Graham is back. You have Vic Fangio, who everybody's going to share with you the fact that he's 0-8 against Patrick Mahomes in his career as a coach. But what they're not going to tell you is that his defenses or his offenses in those games averaged less than 12 points per game. His offenses or his quarterbacks also threw 8 interceptions in those games. The Chiefs scored 6 defensive or special teams touchdowns in those games. Vic Fangio's defense actually only allowed 21.6 points per game against Patrick Mahomes in those 8 matchups between the Dolphins and the Broncos. I think this defense has a really good chance of holding them in check because the biggest concern is the Travis Kelce matchup against the linebackers. But with that front, you can play a lot of light boxes, get an extra defensive back on the field, and give this offense a lot of trouble because they have been living in short areas of the field. Mahomes attempted or completed only 2 passes of 10-plus air yards in that game last week. If you play in those short areas of the field against a really highly talented defense, I think the Eagles can get off the field and keep this game into a situation where they're going to be able to give their offense a chance. And I think their offense has a great chance against this defense that I don't know if you remember from that, the Raiders was a game they played late in the season. Their run defense has fallen off, and it hasn't been against good opponents. This offense has a good chance, and the defense is as good as this team's faced all year.
So you're picking the Eagles?
I'm picking the
Absolutely
Eagles in the first half. I don't know if I can do it with the game.
I do think it is a really good point. I think the Bucs comparison, I saw that you were going with that. I didn't know what you were going to go with, but that game was crazy. I've never seen someone get beat up more than Mahomes got beat up in that game. And I said it last week. I think the physicality of the Eagles is the big difference maker of their team. They did it to Washington. They beat them up. It was like when you're in high school and you're all excited for the game, and then you look across the field and you see other guys and you're like, all right, this is not going to be good. But here's the difference. Patrick Mahomes from that point to this point is a completely different human being. What a lot of people don't realize, you talk about the slow part in the middle of the season is the Chiefs lack to produce these crazy numbers on offense. It is a feature, not a bug. It is how it is designed by them. Patrick Mahomes, if he wanted to throw 55 touchdowns this year, he could have. If he wanted to play that kind of reckless football, he's just so much of a smarter player. He's so much more willing to take the game as it comes to him. He's willing to lose on downs. He's willing to, punt the ball. He's willing to do these things that a lot of the other quarterbacks aren't willing to do because they think it's the right thing for their team. So I think that will be the interesting matchup between the teams.
I don't know if I didn't even mention this when they've kicked Joe Tooney out to tackle, right, and then they brought in I can't remember his name. Caliendo in at guard, and they haven't been able to run the ball at all. They're bottom 5 in EPA running the ball. That's been if you're getting into a situation where you can't run the football against this team and keep their defense honest, that's going to give you a chance to pin your ears back, get after the quarterback. You're probably not going to see as much Jordan Davis because they're going to be able to be looking to rush a lot more.
Probably a good chance to look at those Mahomes rushing props.
I will say I don't hate the comparison to the Bucs because, again, I think this Eagles team is super talented. But somehow we got through that entire segment without mentioning that Tom Brady was on that team, a guy winning his 7th Super Bowl. So
he was good, if memory serves. Look, I know there are plenty of people out there who would love to see the Eagles stomp the Chiefs and derail Kansas City's bid for history. That's not unreasonable, I don't think. However, there are also some folks out there on social media who are just so incensed, so bothered that Kansas City is back in the Super Bowl that they're threatening not to watch the game. Believe it or not, #boycott Super Bowl is a thing right now. It's insane. Zachy, what do you say to these folks who are just so bothered by the Chiefs that they won't even watch the Super Bowl? What is your message for the Chiefs haters?
Well, my first message is I want to say I get it. I understand. I know where you're coming from. It can get annoying. You know, there's a tax that you have to pay on a football fan. It's the taxes that the league has to make money. So they give you the Taylor Swift stuff's kind of annoying. The ref stuff's kind of annoying. I personally am annoyed with the Kelsey brothers. I don't need to see them anymore. I get it. We understand the shtick. We can move on. Tom Brady's calling the game. It should be Greg Olsen. There are annoying things that come with all of this, the glitz and glamour of the NFL. But there's a deeper way to watch the game. I went online. I saw this boycott Super Bowl. I saw people saying they're not going to watch. I'm seeing people watch football games and at the end of it, be upset, be frustrated, take that out on other people, take that out in their on their homes. And you don't have to live that way. It doesn't have to be that way. We only get so many football games in our life. It is the most beautiful sport in the world. And I understand fandom affects this and all this stuff, but my favorite football writer / podcaster ever is this guy named Chris Wessling. He passed away in 2021 tragically. He had this question: if he was hiring a sports writer, what would he ask him? And he said, I would ask him, how do you deal with the essential meaninglessness of football? It's grown men advancing an inflated pigskin into enemy territory. Why does this matter? Who cares? And he said, it's because you get to see humans at their best. You get to see them expand beyond what we think is possible. It's like Beethoven's poems. It's like or Shakespeare's poems and Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. It is art at its finest. And I encourage you to try and block out all of the noise and enjoy that. Watch Patrick Mahomes do what he does. Watch Saquon Barkley be one of the most agile, strange, moving, powerful, graceful human beings ever. Watch Andy Reid versus Vic Fangio battle it out on the field. See what Steve Spagnuolo dials up. There's a lot more to fandom that comes to this beautiful, beautiful game that we all love. And like I said, we only get so many football games in our life. Watch this one.
There you go.
Nothing to add to that.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Okay, now, looking back a little bit, one of the major inflection points in the Chiefs' victory over the poor Bills in the AFC Championship game was obviously that controversial Buffalo turnover on downs early in the fourth quarter. Josh Allen's QB sneak was deemed to have come up short, and that call was upheld upon video review, even though it looked like he maybe kind of potentially got the first down.
Did you look at the angle that was not straight on with the line to gain?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. These unreliable, there you go. You can see it on your screen. Oh, come on, that's definitive, said nobody ever. Anyways, that call and the ensuing Kansas City touchdown and their eventual victory renewed the conversation over how primitive the NFL's methodology remains when it comes to determining the spot of the ball. Zachy, I'm going to go back to you. Is it time for the NFL to up its game tech-wise, particularly when it comes to determining the spot of the ball?
So again, I think you could tell by the last rant, I am a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to football. I'm a bit of a traditionalist in life in general, and I much prefer human error to technological error. You know, I think that there's something beautiful about the chain gang guys walking out there with their chains. Is it stupid? Yes, it's stupid, but football is stupid, you know? Like, and I also, like, I just don't really understand the technology. It's like, maybe this is a dumb question, but it's like, where does the chip go in the ball? Can it tell where the end and the beginning of it is? Is it in the middle? How's it going to correspond with like somebody's knee going down? Are we going to have a 10-minute break in the game because the football can't connect to the Bluetooth and the referee's asking for the Wi-Fi password? Like, I'm just not sure that this is an element that we need to add into the game. I think it's kind of just something you got to take it as it is, and they're going to make mistakes, and that's life.
One thing's for sure. If that QB sneak is deemed a first down, we're not having this conversation, but obviously because it benefited KC, we are. Wilkie, where are you at with this?
I mean, yeah, I think that they should use all the technology they have at their disposal to try to make the right calls, so this is not a talking point coming out of these games. Like, it's not good for business that we're all, people are cooking up conspiracy theories about how we're just trying to get the Chiefs for the Super Bowl, right?
Absolutely.
Like, that's not a good thing. I just don't know what the answer is because, a lot of times people will bring up the technology that's used in, like, tennis, right? Like, it's not the same thing. Like, the reason that replay couldn't show exactly what happened on that play is because there are a million bodies around, like, blocking the ball. We can't see exactly where it is. So that's going to be a challenge with any sort of technology. So I don't know what the answer is, but I just think in general, whether it's this, whether it's controversial penalties, they need to use replay to the fullest extent of its capabilities, and like whether it's buzzing in if there's like a roughing the passer penalty, like that we just overrule in the moment on the fly, so we're not stopping the game. Like just do that. Just get these things right, however you need to do it.
We do need to be careful because we did do this whole thing with pass interference, and it went really, really poorly in terms of just time it took during the game. So I'm open to replay if, like you said, it's called in. It's something that we're not, we're not constantly challenging. Going to commercial, looking at the play, coming back from commercial, they're still looking at the screen. I want this called down. I want somebody that doesn't interrupt the flow of the game too much if we're going to be using replay at a high rate.
Yeah, look, it's a difficult balance to swing, maintaining entertainment value without sacrificing, getting the call correct. It's a tough one.
And I'm with Zach. Just man ball. This is a man's game. Men are going to come out there. They're going to measure the chains. They're going to put their hands together. We're this close.
Yeah.
What a world.
There's something just endearing about that.
No, I agree.
All right, gents, we got to pivot a bit here. As we gear up for the Super Bowl, we're also wrapping up this year's head coaching hiring cycle. In fact, as of this moment, I believe there's only one team, the New Orleans Saints, that doesn't have a head coach right now.
Looks like they're going to hire Kellen Moore probably.
There you go. As of this moment, they don't have a head coach, but by the time we're done recording, maybe they will. And we'll talk a bunch about coaches in today's episode, but let's start with maybe the most dramatic or chaotic hiring of the cycle. Liam Cohen taking over as the Jacksonville Jaguars head coach after previously agreeing to stay on as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator in exchange for a hefty raise. Bottom line, Cohen, who was the offensive play caller for a top 5 Tampa Bay offense this year, he's now running the show in Jacksonville. Is Liam Cohen the answer for the Jags?
I think the Jags had two options, and I believe we talked about this before. It's putting all your chips behind the quarterback you just paid $275 million and doing everything you can to ensure that money's well spent. Or you bring in a defensive schemer that can help a defense that really lacks talent in their secondary, a scheme that might be able to help those deficiencies. I was of the belief that they probably should have leaned that direction. Like I would have liked the Robert Saleh hire to be able to help out on the defensive side and have belief in your, $200, $300 million quarterback that he can do it with, a play caller that they ultimately hire. Now, Cohen can still do that. Like he can still find a DC that's going to be able to, help the defense and make up for their deficiencies in terms of talent. They're talking to Minnesota or assistants from Minnesota, Los Angeles, just that tree of McVay kind of deal. Mm-hmm. And they're talking to Patrick Graham, who I think did a good job with the Raiders. So they could solve...
He re-signed with the Raiders.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Okay. I saw that he had an interview with him, so that was my consideration as a decent option, but who knows what they're going to do. I think that Cohen is... this is his 6th stop in 6 seasons. Like he was with Kentucky in college twice, he's with the Rams twice, the Bucks, and now he's here in Jacksonville. My question is personnel something that has really helped him in terms of... Like, this is a really good Bucks offense in terms of talent, I think. His second time at Kentucky went really poorly once Will Levis was out of there. He was there when the Rams had one of their worst seasons they've had in quite some time under Sean McVay. I like Cohen, but I do think he's a little... I don't want to go too much off vibes, but the vibes from the press conference were not, like, overwhelmingly... provided a lot of overwhelming confidence. I can see it working, but I do wish they went focused more on a defensive coach than offensive.
I get the idea behind defensive. So there's kind of two sides of this, and I've kind of find ways to be skeptical of both sides. One, if they had gone defensive, I feel like you can definitely just look at the Bucks. Like they have that defensive head coach, and they've got their offensive coordinator picked off multiple years in a row.
Yep.
If you have Trevor Lawrence, who you want to get on the right track, I think it is smart to go in this direction of an offensive mind. You're going to have that consistency for as long as he's your head coach, which you hope is a long time. But the one hang-up I do have, as much as I love Cohen and his schemes and how well he did with the Bucks this year, I think we do kind of prop up offensive play callers just a little bit where it's like, oh, this guy calls good plays, head coach, like every single time. And it's like, there's more to being a head coach than just being a good play caller. So I think he could work out. I'm excited to see it because, again, I loved everything he did in Tampa Bay, but I think we do start to favor the offensive head coaches a little too much these days.
Yeah, and to be clear, for anyone that has... I know Bucks fans are not happy. I don't think as an organization you could hold over someone's head like, hey, we'd like to have you back. We'll pay you more money, but you're not allowed to take an interview.
Yeah, the controversy about this was so stupid.
You can't hold that over a guy's head. What, are you going to fire him? You want him to stay. Like, you don't hold that type of power.
Totally.
Also, there's no way we're getting through the segment without getting a Duval. We gotta... Somebody's gotta... I got it. All right, ready? Duval.
That was actually pretty good. You should have interviewed for the
that's all
Jaguars
it
head
takes.
coach vacancy. Look, say what you will about Cohen's cringy introductory press conference, but he didn't get a fraction of the flack that the Cowboys did for making longtime offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer their new head coach. This was not a sexy choice. Schottenheimer's resume is not terribly compelling, and he doesn't have the aura, to bring it back to aura, he doesn't have the aura of many of the other guys who were hired in this head coaching cycle. Wilk, what are the Cowboys thinking?
Just this was unbelievable, yet also so predictable. I mean, they just a really embarrassing coaching search. They interview all of 4 candidates. It was Schottenheimer, Kellen Moore, Robert Saleh, and Leslie Frazier. That's it. And then they settle on promoting the offensive coordinator to replace Mike McCarthy. Man, this team is so frustrating to me because you look at everything the Cowboys could be. I think we talked about it last week or the week before. We were talking about candidates for the Cowboys, and you threw Ben Johnson's name out there. The idea being top candidates should be interested in this job, and the Cowboys should be interested in top candidates.
People want to make fun of Dak. Dak Prescott's a really good quarterback.
Yeah, this should be a good job.
Yep.
But the thing is that top candidates have leverage to push for both big money and for some semblance of power in the organization. Jerry Jones has no interest in giving up either of those things. Now, the power is one thing. Like, you could probably work around that. Not all head coaches get, or first-time head coaches even get, some level of power in decision-making. But you could work around those things if you're willing to pay up. But Jerry Jones is never interested in doing that. He never has been, and he never will be. He does not see the value in paying head coaches. This despite being an organization that is by far the most valuable in all of sports. Yeah, the most recent Forbes
crazy.
estimations have the Cowboys as the only team in professional sports that's worth more than $10 billion.
Wow.
I believe their operating income, according to their estimates, is $564 million, which is more than or almost double the next closest NFL team. This could just be such a big advantage for the Cowboys if they allowed it to be. Because remember, there is no salary cap on putting together your coaching staff. There's nothing stopping Jerry Jones from flexing his financial resources, going out and getting the best coaching staff football has ever seen. But again, he does not see the value in that. He would rather save the money, lean on familiarity, go for these guys who understand how the coaching staff works in Dallas, wouldn't come in and be looking to shake anything up, and just kind of not really change anything about how that organization has worked over the past however many years because, you know, they've been so successful at it. I mean,
The crazy thing is Schottenheimer wasn't going anywhere. Like
No.
like nobody was poaching Brian Schottenheimer. You already had him on your team. You might as well have just hired Deion Sanders. You might as well have just said, Brian Schottenheimer, you continue to run the offense. We're going to bring Deion in, and he's going to try and galvanize the guys and do whatever it is that he does and let him do that. There's a million figurehead guys you could have hired and kept Brian Schottenheimer if you like him so much. And let me tell you, Brian Schottenheimer doesn't have some kind of crazy leadership quality that he needs to be standing in front of the team doing a big meeting.
yeah, I mean, look, that's what's so frustrating about this team because it has all the resources to be everything it could want to be. Jerry Jones talks a big game about wanting to do everything he could possibly do to win to get another Super Bowl. But as far as I'm concerned, he doesn't care about winning nearly as much as he says. So.
Dude, the Cowboys should be the Los Angeles Dodgers of the NFL, and instead they're the Los Angeles Angels. Boom.
Right now,
that?
yeah, right now.
Look,
I mean,
man.
look, with the Commanders were playing this past weekend, that gives the Cowboys the longest conference title game drought of any team in the NFC.
Shocking.
You're the Dallas Cowboys.
Man, of course you wouldn't pay up
Unserious.
for a head coach. You wouldn't pay up for Derrick Henry. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
it's absolutely criminal, man. It's infuriating. Look, but it's tempting to poke holes and criticize new coaching hires, and Jerry Jones definitely made it way too easy this time around. But let's focus on some of the hiring decisions that you guys are most optimistic about. Because there's a lot of experienced veteran coaches who now find themselves in new environs, and they really have a chance to make a real impact and potentially transform their new teams. So I'm curious to know which coaching hires you guys are the most bullish about, which is to say, which of the newly hired head coaches will improve his new team the most? Wilk, let's start with you.
I think this one's kind of easy. I'm going to go with Mike Vrabel. Obviously, the Patriots were awful under Gerard Mayo. To be clear, I think we talked about it. That's not his fault. I think you can make a pretty strong case that he should not have been fired after just 1 year on the job. But I think it's also fair to say that they upgraded pretty well at the head coach position. Vrabel's just one of those guys who has always gotten the absolute most out of his teams. He had such competitive teams in Tennessee despite pretty mediocre rosters, in my opinion, and also Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. Now, no disrespect to Ryan Tannehill, but now he's taking over a team with a guy in Drake May who I see as one of the most, it's Pro Bowler, but who I see moving forward as one of the most talented young quarterbacks in the league. He's got all the resources he could possibly need to kind of build that roster up from scratch around him in his vision. It might take a couple of years to reach that like contender status, but I think we're going to see big improvements right away. I think Vrabel is that good.
T, what about you?
I'm not super excited about immediate improvements from this entire group of guys. Obviously, Ben Johnson's like the obvious one for everybody. I do think Aaron Glenn is in a really good spot to be able to just immediately elevate the quality of play from the team, because I think it's very obvious that the Jets quit as soon as Robert Saleh lost his job. This defense was top 10 in EPA against the run and the pass in the first 5 weeks of the season, and in the final from week 6 to 18, they were bottom 5 in both of those categories. This defense just flat out quit. Yes, injuries were a factor, no doubt about it, but I do think this is a team that does have a good foundation. Obviously, quarterback being the most important. It's not a good spot, a position group, but you've got an offensive line that I think they really steadied on. They're going to lose a few pieces, but Olu Fashanu, who they took, is going to be able to step in. I think be a good option at left tackle. You've got Will McDonald, who stepped up and had a good year with some of the injuries. You had Jermaine Johnson, who got hurt but was playing really well up until that injury that will be back. I do like some of the pieces on defense. I know DJ Reed, Javon Kinlaw, and Hassan Reddick are going to be gone, but you got a seventh overall pick. You can plug a hole with an immediate starter with the first round pick that you have. And I think Glenn is someone that can really rebuild the culture there. And as long as Aaron Rodgers is not in the building, I think they'll be a better team next year than they were this year.
Hey, man, Aaron Rodgers, 18-4 touchdown to interception ratio
One of the best
over his
Jets
last 10 games.
of all time.
Yeah. By the way, I should preface this by saying I encourage the guys to avoid saying Ben Johnson because he was the incredibly obvious choice, so that's why we haven't heard his name yet. Zachy, how about you?
My pick is I'm going to go with Pete Carroll. I actually, for the first time since like 2001, I like what the Raiders are doing in general. That's right, Wilkie. I like what the Raiders are doing. I like the Tom Brady involvement, hearing him bringing in Alex Guerrero. Like, I pray this is what makes him quit commentating, because I can't stand his commentating. But I think can do a really good job running the Raiders, and it's obvious that they had like the Ben Johnson sort of flirtation, and that didn't work out. And what they decided was, let's build a foundation. And I don't think there's anybody better to build a foundation than Pete Carroll. He took the Seahawks from nothing. He made them into something. He took USC in one of their most down periods of all time, built them into like a beautiful powerhouse. My dad was a huge Pete Carroll fan when he was a Jets coach in the 90s. Like he has that ability to bring the spirits of everybody up, to create a base level of competition that's like needed in order for a team to be successful. And I think for teams like the Jets, for teams like the Raiders, these teams that are so broken, you just got to get to that baseline. And you saw Pete Carroll, it's so underrated what he did, letting go of Russell Wilson at the exact right time that he let go of him, and coming back the next year with Geno Smith, who everybody thought was a complete joke. And that franchise continued to not win Super Bowls, but win games, be competitive, field a great team. And I think that's what Pete Carroll's going to do for the Raiders.
Wilkie, what's your take? I'm curious that the Raiders went with someone who has more of a defensive identity.
I think Pete Carroll is an amazing coach. He has been for a long time. My only hang up with the hire, as we were starting to hear about it, was, okay, like, what's his staff going to look like? Specifically on the defensive side of the ball, I was like, okay, is it going to be like Gus Bradley as his defensive coordinator? Like, I don't want to see that. I want to see him like embrace like the newer age of defense. Mm-hmm. But then he kept Patrick Graham, who has, I think, been an outstanding defensive coordinator for the Raiders. And now I'm like, okay, so
that's a great sign.
I'm way more interested now. I think it seems like the offensive coordinator is going to be Darrell Bevell. A lot of people don't love that. I'm personally totally fine with that. I think he's a solid coordinator who now has 3 years coming off in Miami, where I think he will probably have expanded his playbook a bit there. But to answer your question, I'm totally fine with the defensive background thing here, because I think his background is in defense, but I think what he's going to be is more of that CEO type head coach, the culture builder, like the program builder, the foundation layer, and like that's what they need. Like, it's just been so much chaos for the last like 20 years. Just I've seen a lot of people describe it as like the grown-up in the room, and I think that that's what they've been dying to have forever. So I think he provides that. No, he's not the like long-term solution. I think ideally he, brings in someone who could eventually be his successor. Whether
Maybe it
that's
is Patrick Graham.
3, 4, 5 years down the line.
Maybe
Maybe
it's
it is.
Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah, successors have done a great job.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think it was Albert Breer who maybe made this connection in the first place, but he compares it to Tom Brady's experience with the Bucs, where they brought in an older Bruce Arians, and then he kind of like handed the reins off
that's
to
a good
Todd
one.
Bowles.
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of what they're going for. And again, like, maybe Pete Carroll wouldn't have been everyone's first choice because of the age, but you can't really argue with the quality of the coach. And the first hire to me, keeping the defensive coordinator in place and like stepping away from like his roots on the defensive side of the ball, it seems like it's off to a good start. So I'm at least encouraged how it's going.
Do you
so far.
you want to see the Trinity back together? Maybe
No, so I've seen.
Carroll, Daryl Bevel. We're missing one guy.
So
Quarterback.
look, it might be Russell Wilson. I don't know.
You actually think it might?
I mean, a lot of people are drawing that connection. I don't think that they'll go in that direction.
Yeah.
One, because you said it, Pete Carroll moved on from Russell Wilson at the right time. He was proven right by this. Like going back to the well there, I'm not sure that would be the smart decision. Personally, I think that they're probably going to pursue a trade for Geno. I don't know that the Seahawks will trade him, but he needs a new contract. We've seen those kind of things fall apart before, so I think that that's one to watch. Russ could happen, but please no. Just no.
Okay, let's put a pin in the coach talk, fellas. Right now, there are 30 teams sitting at home getting ready to watch Super Bowl 59, each of them with a different level of regret about their ultimately fruitless 2024 season. But obviously, the regret that the Bills are feeling right now is more intense than what the Patriots are feeling, right? So, fellas, let me ask you, which playoff team do you think has the most regret about not winning the Super Bowl this year? Or framed another way, which playoff team do you think will have the hardest time getting back and making a legitimate Super Bowl run next year? Wilkie, what do you got?
I won't say that it's the hardest time, but I really do think that the Lions did miss out on something here. Like we talked about it a little bit before the coaching hires were made official. But I feel even more strongly about it now that just like they had such a nice window there where their coaching staff was absolutely stacked. They get both coordinators picked off in the same offseason because after that 2022 season or after the 2023 season, both could have gone. Both could have taken head coaching jobs, and they both stayed. They ran it back. This was the year to do it. They both leave. I'm not super excited about the moves that they made to replace him. I mean, the Kelvin Shepard on the defensive side could absolutely be fine. Yeah. But going from Ben Johnson to John Morton as offensive coordinator, I don't know. Like that offense could look a lot different. I don't know if
He used to be a Jets offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
That's everything you need to know about him.
he's been a senior offensive assistant on various staffs for years since his last experience as an offensive coordinator. I think you could have a big drop off with that group. The offensive line has kind of been getting older over the last few years. I don't know if Jared Goff's going to look the same without Ben Johnson, so I am a little worried about that. I do, again, I think I said it last week, I do believe in Dan Campbell. I believe in what this front office has been doing to build this team. But, man, this is a lot to overcome. The two guys that left are going to be taking some coaches with them, so I don't know. It's possible that the Lions missed their window. I hope not, but
I firmly believe this will be the best roster in the league next year.
The Lions?
Yeah.
Next year, I think next year you'll be right.
But
then
I just don't know about the coaching stuff can derail things completely like it did with the Eagles.
Gibbs gonna have to get paid soon. Hutchinson gonna have to get paid soon. Jameson Williams gonna have to get paid soon. Like that's when their problems are gonna start.
Yeah.
And they're already paying Sewell, and they're paying Goff, and they're paying Amon-Ra. It's like that's when it's gonna be.
The Lions
tricky.
could still win it all, like in the next few years. Like I don't like deny that possibility, but this past year was the one to do it, and obviously injuries got in the way.
Yeah. I just say that because I think when you match them up against anybody, I think they're going to be able to compete because all the talent in the secondary that finally gets some help from the D-line would be really good for them. But yeah, coaching is the question.
The thing is, I mean, the defense that gave up 45 points to the Commanders was not the defense that they had on paper, right? Like they were missing so many key guys that, it made sense that the dam would break at some point because they had done a really good job kind of defying all the injuries that they had suffered over the course of the regular season. But who knows? On one hand, it did feel like the stars were kind of aligning for them this year, but we'll see. There's still a lot of talent in place. All right. What about you, T?
Yeah, much like Detroit, Baltimore didn't play in the AFC Championship game. But I do think that anytime you have an MVP season from your quarterback and Lamar looks like he's going to win MVP, you got to feel like there's a lot of regret from the season that was. And then you look at everything else that happened with this team. You have the Bills that I think we can all agree were in a retooling type of year, and they proved that they retooled just fine. The Chiefs, they've been in this cycle of playing late and playing into February year after year. That could potentially have some effects. And then you look at Baltimore from a health perspective. You had Ronnie Stanley play the most snaps he has his entire career. Didn't miss a single game. That was shocking. You have Rashad Bateman have a career year, breakout, 11 touchdowns, over 800 yards receiving. Zay Flowers has a breakout year too, has over 1,200 yards. He's a Pro Bowler. Whether or not, Pro Bowlers are just being handed out to anyone these days. And then the defense, I thought that their pass rush last year was a bit of a fluke. Like, I didn't think their talent matched up to what they were doing. This year, second best pass rush in the AFC behind the Texans. Kyle Van Noy just goes, yeah, I'm getting older, but it doesn't really matter. I'll still puts up double-digit sacks. They had Odaf Owe kind of breakout. Matabike was a guy I thought could not sustain what he did last year or the year before. He didn't completely sustain it, but proved he was no fluke. This team had it all come together in my mind. And when you have a good offensive year like that with your run game too, you have to think, if we beat the Bills, could we have given the Chiefs a better run for their money than what Buffalo did and potentially win that game? I think this is a year of huge regret for Baltimore from a roster, team, coach, everything's encompassing.
That's the thing. You didn't even mention their 30-year-old running back put up more than 2,000 yards from scrimmage. It's just so hard to imagine their offense clicking like it did this year. One of the greatest quarterbacking seasons in the history of the game, combined with an absolutely terrifying rush game. And the frustrating thing is, the devastating thing is, they didn't collapse, right? They absolutely dismantled Pittsburgh. They competed against Buffalo. Lamar didn't shrivel in the big moment, and if not for a brutal Mark Andrews drop, maybe their season is still going. Yeah, maybe their season is still going. Yeah. Maybe they're playing for a Super Bowl next Sunday.
They had a good chance to win that game as Buffalo did.
Yeah,
I will say a lot of the conversation around teams like this and these teams that can't get over the hump will center around the quarterbacks. Lamar can't do it in the playoffs. Like, you'll hear that a lot. First of all, that's overblown, but we did this a lot with past quarterbacks, right? Like, it took Peyton Manning a long time to get over the hump. You just mentioned that the Bills were in a retooling year. Even if the Ravens enter that, retooling year, I think they're still going to have a chance with Lamar. So I agree with you. This was the year for them to do it, but I don't think that it rules it out in the future. I'll probably stubbornly pick them to win the Super Bowl this
year. How many MVP seasons do you want from Lamar Jackson?
They're still in a good place.
Especially the way he plays, right? At some point, he's going to get hurt. His performance is going to drop off. He's not going to run the ball as much. He's not going to be as dynamic. But, I don't know. Tough pill to swallow for Baltimore. What about you, Zachy? Who you got?
I got the Rams. The Rams really surprised me at the end of the year. I thought they were playing great football. I thought they had a good a chance as anybody to make it to the Super Bowl. They gave the Eagles their best game by far, I think. they're hearing rumors now that Stafford is available for trade. So if you lose Matthew Stafford, that kind of feels like the whole thing's going to crumble down for that. It does make me wonder, are there some conversations between McVay and his pal in Minnesota about Sam Darnold and what they're going to do with him? And maybe McVay's looking at Sam Darnold as the next quarterback for the Rams, which I think would be really fun. I think Sam Darnold would do great there. And we have talked about this in the past. The Rams are kind of building up in the draft, and they're being able to do that thing. I just don't see it lasting that long. Cooper Kupp's on his way out, and I don't think that Sean McVay is long for the position that he's in. He had talks the year after they won the Super Bowl of retiring. Aaron Donald retired early. Sean McVay is I've always thought of Sean McVay, and maybe because I think they coached together, I've always thought of Sean McVay as the proto John Gruden. Obviously a better, longer run than John Gruden. People forget in the early 2000s, John Gruden was looked at as a genius. And John Gruden got out a little bit earlier than he thought he was going to get out, and he went to the Monday Night Football booth. I could see a really similar path for Sean McVay, that he's in the booth 2 or 3 years from now and just enjoying that LA life and just, being a superstar. So I think the Rams, I think this is going to be the beginning of the end for them.
Yeah, I think that the Stafford stuff might be a little more just contract negotiation leverage than it is actual rumors. But like I mentioned with Gino, we've seen these things fall apart before, right? He's going to be, I think he's 36, maybe he's 37. He definitely only has a few years left, if that.
He's taken a lot of hits.
Yeah, he's going to want a new contract. It's possible that the Rams aren't going to want to give him exactly what he wants, so maybe he has to look elsewhere. That would definitely change it for the Rams. And I think that they're a Super Bowl contender for as long as he's playing with McVay coaching. But if he's gone, that changes everything, like you said.
Bumped the mic there. Good stuff, gents. Last thing. I know you're all stoked to see Kendrick Lamar perform during the halftime show at Super Bowl 59, but if you had your pick, if you were in charge, who would your dream Super Bowl halftime act be? Wilk?
I don't have one personally that I would really stump for here, so let's
Wow,
continue.
that's lame.
Hold on.
I don't even like music.
It's gonna end up being the best one, so I'll just stump for the one that's gonna upset all the Brads and Chads out there and the anti-Chiefs people. So give me Taylor Swift on the biggest stage.
Let's
because
go.
I am an appreciator of greatness.
You hear that? Hear that in the distance? That's people unsubscribing. I can hear their thumbs hitting the button. Right
Or a whole new audience that never was subscribed before.
We should go the Swiftie route.
But if the Chiefs are in it, wouldn't she have to recuse herself? There's a conflict of interest there.
Look, so this is the benefit, right? So everyone who doesn't want the Chiefs to be in it, then maybe one year they're not in it, but then they get Taylor Swift as the halftime show. So
true.
you got to pick your poison here.
Touche. T, how about you?
When I was thinking this, I'm like, Post Malone would be good.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, how about the girl that when I sit down on my couch on Sunday morning, I'm just thinking about the entire day, and that's Carrie Underwood, who gets me ready for Sunday Night Football. She's a fantastic part of the game for I don't even know how many years now. The Sunday night with Sunday Night Football, she's done I believe she's done the anthem once or twice.
Yeah.
I think she's great. She's one of those people that I kind of identify the game with.
Maybe just sing the Sunday night theme song 4 times.
Yeah.
Why not?
I'm a country music guy as it is, so she's a great fit.
I absolutely lock in when Carrie Underwood comes on for Sunday Night Football.
You do everything you can not to miss it.
You know, apparently she gets like $1 million a week to film those.
Yeah, 'cause she does have to do new ones for each matchup.
Yeah, she does like the little the ad lib about like the Bills or whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's
But
a
you
good
must
gig.
film them way in advance, right? Like we
Well,
already know the
as
Sunday
soon
night
as the
schedule
schedule
throughout
is
the
set,
season.
right?
Yeah.
They flex.
No,
them
she's
now.
in there for flex week. She stays ready.
Oh wow.
No buys for Carrie Underwood.
Why doesn't football love Carrie Underwood back? Why doesn't the NFL love Carrie Underwood back like she loves the NFL?
It's a great.
I mean,
If she's getting $1 million
Yeah,
a week,
they
they
definitely love her
I'm
if she's
telling you,
getting
they
that
love
much
her.
Well, that's NBC. That's not the NFL.
yeah, true.
Zach, how about you?
Well, I want to. So there was an obvious answer for me. The problem is that with the current state of affairs, it's not a person that I can stand behind. So because this is a fantasy question, I'm going to a fantasy world. And it's like, if we could go into a time machine and like grab 2010 Kanye West and like pull him into the future, that's who I want performing. I don't want 2025 Kanye West, but I want, stronger and like Daft Punk to be out there with the helmets and like give me power and have Jay-Z come out and do Otis. Like that would have been the greatest halftime show of all time. It can't happen in its current form. I also looked it up. Kanye West has 64 million monthly Spotify listeners. I haven't heard a song of his out loud in like 7 years. Like there are people that want this. It would be great. It would be a great performance. The circumstances are changing ever presently, and I don't stand behind anything, and there's no endorsements. Just that one particular brand of music I really loved.
Okay,
Clearly, if you're saying that would have been a better halftime performance than MJ in his prime, again, not an endorsement of MJ.
Yeah.
No, for me though, I desperately want to see the newly reunited Oasis play the Super Bowl halftime show. I just think they would bring some really refreshing irreverence to the whole thing. Like all the American artists, all the artists who play the Super Bowl halftime show, they care so much. It's a career highlight for them. They're so invested in their performances. The production value is sky high. And the Gallagher brothers, you just know, they would not care at all. They wouldn't care even a little bit. They would be unfazed, maybe even apathetic. And I think it'd be hilarious to watch. Like, they don't care about the NFL. Playing the Super Bowl halftime show wouldn't hold a candle to playing in front of 250,000 people at Nebworth in 1994. And I just think it'd be so funny to see the contrast between how little they care about everything going on and how much everyone else in the building cares. Like it's the most important thing they've ever done, being at this Super Bowl. And you never know, a fight could break out between Liam and Noel, and that'd be a Super Bowl first of the halftime act just throwing haymakers on stage. So yeah.
And the songs go crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. They're all bops,
Yeah.
all rippers, no skippers. That's what Oasis did. I'm mad for it. I want to see the boys play the Super Bowl halftime show. Roger Goodell, write it down. And that brings us, fellas, you know what time it is. It's trivia time. Here we go. In Super Bowl history, only 10 quarterbacks have had a game with 3 or more passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Name them. One more time. In Super Bowl history, so we're looking at 58 games so far, only 10 quarterbacks have had a game with 3 or more passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions thrown. Name them. Zachy, you get the first pick.
All right, so I'm just going to do what everybody would do in this spot and just say Tom Brady.
Obviously, correct. He is one of 2 quarterbacks who had 2 such games. Believe it or not, he did it once in a loss, in the loss to Nick Foles and the Philadelphia Eagles, fittingly enough. And then once, he did it against Kansas City. So it's kind of the perfect answer. Tom Brady did it twice. Correct. Wilk?
Nick Foles.
Oh.
Did he throw a pick?
I was thinking about him too.
I couldn't remember.
Incorrect.
I couldn't
Didn't
remember
they score
a
like
pick.
45 points?
Yeah.
They scored a lot of, I think it was 41 points, but yeah, Nick Foles not on the list.
All right.
I'm going to verify that. Yeah. Oh, man. He actually threw, wait for it. He threw 3 touchdowns, but he threw an interception. Unfortunately, Nick Foles not on the
hate to
list.
see that.
Wilkie, sad to see you go, man. T.
I'm going to stick with the strategy of multiple appearances, so I'm going to say Patrick Mahomes.
Correct. He did it in Super Bowl 57 against the Philadelphia Eagles.
I'm going to go the same way. I'm going to say Joe Montana.
Correct. He is the second quarterback who did it 2 times. He did it in 84 and he did it in 89.
Oh, yeah, it's just 2 of us left. Okay. Another guy with multiple appearances. Eli?
Wow.
Hate to see it. And Zachy, since you went first, you're the champion, man.
Oh, wow.
That's
Love it.
You don't need to name another one.
Can I try and knock off a couple more?
Absolutely.
What about Terry Bradshaw?
You should have stopped
Damn,
while you were ahead.
damn.
Terry
I
Bradshaw,
just made myself
not
look
on the
terrible
list.
there.
Pretty sure the Giants
Did-
scored like a combined 24 points in their 2 Super Bowl wins.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right, Tyler. I think you're right. What you're
What?
about to say.
Did Stafford throw any?
No.
He didn't throw any
He's not
picks?
on the list.
He's not
Stafford's
the
not
picks.
on the list.
Burrow
I don't
did
think he
that
threw
Super
3
Bowl, right?
touchdowns, but if he did,
Oh, he's
Is Trent Dilfer?
touchdowns.
Is
That's
Trent
what I forgot
Dilfer on the
about.
list?
Trent Dilfer's not on the list, but there is a Baltimore Ravens quarterback.
That was
on the
really
list.
dumb.
He had like 34. They had like 34 points against
Oh
the
yeah,
Giants
the
or something.
Ravens-Niners game was a high-scoring one.
It sure was.
Oh,
It sure
yeah.
was.
Joe
Here are the guys
Flacco.
you missed. Joe Flacco, 2012.
Nice.
Aaron Rodgers, 2010. Jake Delhomme,
Wow.
in 2003 in a game he lost, which is pretty impressive, obviously, to the Patriots. Steve Young in 1994 when he set the Super Bowl record with 6 passing touchdowns. Troy Aikman in 1992, he threw for 4 touchdowns in that massacre of the Bills in Super Bowl 27. Phil Simms in Super Bowl 21, he was the MVP. And then last but not least, Jim Plunkett in 1980, Super Bowl 15 MVP. Wilkie,
People
hang your
forget.
head in shame
Yeah.
Jim
because that was an
Plunkett.
Oakland Raiders Super Bowl title over the Philadelphia
Look,
Eagles.
I was just trying to go for the deep cut with Nick Foles and save all the easy ones for later. So
I would have said Nick Foles. I had Nick Foles in my mind, but
yeah.
In any event, congratulations to our boy Zachy Sports. He is the champion. We're going to mark it down. Filling in for Boone. Man, you're doing some heavy
Boone
lifting for
W.
Boone's.
I got 2 of Boone's.
Score.
I'm in second place.
Yeah, you are.
You're tied for, well, yeah, I guess, look, you guys are a team, so you're tied for first.
All right, love it.
But there aren't going to be ties in the Super Bowl. That's a
Wow.
fact. All right. That'll do it for today's episode of No Timeouts. Once again, that is Zachy Sports. That is Tyler MacKillop. That's Dan Wilkins. My name is Jonah Birenbaum. We'll see you next time.